My guest is Jordan Bateman, the VC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So, Government Waste Awards, always a fun time of year. Who's been the most wasteful out there?
Yeah, well, these are our 19th annual Teddy Waste Awards. This is really the signature event of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation's year. We take the Charles Lynch Press Theatre on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. Our federal director this year, Aaron Woodrick, and our pig mascot, Porky the Waste Hater, they go out there and present the awards. So a number of nominees, but the winners this year, a couple of Ontario winners, but the City of Victoria also won the Municipal Award for its bungled Blue Bridge project. And for the first time in Teddy Waste Award history, the mayor of the city that won the Municipal Waste Award didn't argue with it, actually said it was well-deserved. So we were pretty shocked to hear the mayor agree with us.
What kind of numbers are we talking about here with the Blue Bridge?
Yeah, the Blue Bridge, for people who have been to Victoria or live in Victoria, this is the small bridge that connects kind of the area by Dockside Green there with the main downtown itself. It's about 100 meters, the span. It goes over the harbor that's still used for some industrial purposes, so the bridge has to lift. It's replacing the old, 93-year-old Johnston Street Bridge, the Blue Bridge that is there currently. Anyways, back in 2009, Victoria City Council said it would cost about $63 million to replace that bridge. But then they just kept screwing up, wrote a terrible contract, made a terrible deal, ended up with some major steel problems, offended the Chinese factory that was making that steel, and now that price tag has ballooned to more than $105 million. $42 million over budget already, and just as bad, a full 3 years behind schedule. So the joke we like to make is, a 100-meter bridge, Usain Bolt could run that in about 9.5 seconds, but the dolts at Victoria City Hall have managed to blow, $105 million trying to bridge it.
Well, one of the problems, isn't it, that they wanted a unique bridge, something that hadn't been done before in the world? Yeah,
exactly. So, these guys get big projectitis, I call it, where, they want that shiny, architectural wonder that they can point to and make themselves feel great. Especially in Victoria, where obviously there's a lot of pressure to be green and innovative. Maybe they felt the pressure, like, why are you building a car bridge at all? Is this just going to induce more traffic? All those usual kind of complaints you hear from the Gregor Robertson type bike crowd. Anyways, they decide to build this bridge. It's going to be beautiful when it's built. It should be for $105 million. Kind of this sloping white railing system. They have all sorts of lanes, bike lane and pedestrian access along with the car stuff. But, the key is, this is a functional working harbor. The bridge has to be able to lift in order to allow some of the larger ships to get through to some industrial parts on the old harbor side there. And so, instead of just, thinking practically, maybe investing half that amount in refurbishing the current bridge, or building, a little bit more, finding a more experienced contractor or a contractor who could deliver on sort of the more experienced project that's been done elsewhere. They decide to reinvent the wheel, and of course, it's taxpayers that end up paying for that.
What else made your Government Waste Award?
Well, the municipal nominees. So the City of Victoria won that, and to Mayor Lisa Helps credit, she voted against that bridge back when she was on City Council before she became mayor. So maybe she was a little bit more willing to accept the award than most. But the municipal category this year had some really, kind of funny ones. Funny in that, you can't believe people are wasting money this way. Sad for the taxpayers involved. So the City of Montreal, they were nominated for expensive fake tree stumps. This is a $3.5 million project where the City of Montreal is buying and installing 27 granite tree stumps on Mount Royal for the city's 375th anniversary. So they just say it's art. It's not a stump, it's a piece of art. Why the world needs granite tree stumps is beyond us, but $3.75 million. And then we had some really weird expense claims. So the CAO of the County of Richmond in Nova Scotia, which is a tiny little office in tiny little municipality in Nova Scotia, he expensed $96,448. really just unbelievable ways. So, he exaggerated his mileage, $429 limousine ride on a business trip in Houston, double-dipped meal expenses, taking a per diem and submitting a receipt. But then also, spent $582 at a local strip club while in Houston. Not surprisingly, he was forced to resign after all that came to light. There was also a Edmonton city manager who spent $140,000 in 3.5 years on just taxpayer-funded trips. So he made 52 trips in 3.5 years on the job. He spent 212 days in that 3-year span working outside the city, approved all his own travel, basically a quarter of his time spent elsewhere, Russia, U.S., Australia, and then finally got fired. So, some pretty questionable expenses from some people who should know a lot better.
Do governments have good control on personal expenses like that? I mean, we look at the Senate scandal, for example.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb is if you're allowed to make your own rules, and you're the one signing your own expense forms, there are not good controls over you. I mean, that's where these guys got into trouble, is they were approving their own expenses. They weren't, accountable to anyone. The council certainly weren't keeping a close enough eye on it. And so they abused the system. The same could be argued for the senators, right? They set their own rules, and they expense a bunch of things that may or may not have been allowed. So, yeah, the less accountability you have, the less oversight you have, the more likely it is that the expenses are going to go bad, which is why we're constantly pushing for strong rules, clear rules, and regular accounting of all these different CAOs and heads of organizations.
Should people in government have to post their expense bills every year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we've pushed for a long time. We've made progress across the country. Nova Scotia was actually the first to post their MLA expenses online. Now British Columbia does it after several years of pushing for it. But yeah, it should extend to any public servant who has the ability to approve their own expense account should have those expenses posted online so that watchdog organizations, media, and individual taxpayers can take a look and see what their money is being spent on.
Should politicians in Canada have to disclose more of their personal finances?
That's an interesting question. I mean, the MLAs have to, talk about who they owe money to, companies they own shares in, properties they own. So I think that's probably a fair enough thing. You can make the argument that, the American system before Trump, the presidential candidates being forced to release their tax returns, that it does give you a window into their financial life. I don't know. At the same time, I do think that even public officials do have some, they should retain some form of privacy. Like, I'm not so keen on seeing individual tax returns released just because, I think people do have a right to make a living before they enter public life. And I'm just not sure what problem we'd be trying to solve by forcing that.
Of course, we look at some jurisdictions, say the president of Russia, who probably officially makes $120,000 a year, and yet he's worth $50 billion. Where did that money come from?
Yeah. I'm not sure though that even the most corrupt public official in Canada can hold accountable to the president of Russia. And if the NSA or the KGB is listening to this recording, it was Jim Goddard who mentioned Mr. Putin, not me.
Well, thanks a lot, Jordan Bateman. We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
Bateman Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Bateman's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at batemanresources.com.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. A big fuss in Vancouver about the city changing its logo. Block letters, no other graphics along with it, green and blue. To me, if I was marking that logo class, I'd give the kid a C. And the current city logo, I don't see anything wrong with it. Everybody I've talked to likes it. But the mayor got very upset when people asked him questions about it. Were those questions viable?
Oh, absolutely. The mayor needs to be questioned on that. The mayor needs to be questioned on this whole logo debacle. So at one point, the mayor gave an interview saying he found the old logo lame, and that's why he was so keen on getting a new one. The new one then turns out just to be a word stamp, which frankly looks suspiciously like the city of Chilliwack's logo, right down to the same Gotham font. Spend $8,000 just on the design, let alone what it actually costs to rebrand everything. And then they bring it out to council and say, vote for this. We're going to phase it in just as things need to be replaced. We'll roll it out. They vote on it. Sure enough, Penny Daflos, the CTV reporter, leaves the council meeting to go file her report for CTV, walks past the receptionist desk at City Hall, and there are City of Vancouver glossy cards already out with the new logo on it. So clearly, unless they'd run out in the 5 minutes that they were making this vote, clearly they were shown to be lying about them phasing it in. Then, after public pressure, after a really interesting Vancouver Metro story where local designers just kicked the snot out of this new design, then you get the mayor backtracking, just unilaterally saying, no, I'm pulling the logo, we're not going to use it, we'll use the old one, and we'll talk about it more. Well, Jim, in Canada, the mayor doesn't actually have the power to override council decisions that he sees fit. He actually has to go back to council and get a resolution to counteract any other resolution that's already passed. Council has voted on that. They passed that new logo, and now he had just unilaterally decided that he was going to override council decisions. So a little bit of a sign of the kind of dictatorship and arrogance of power that Gregor Robertson has so comfortably settled into after a decade as mayor of Vancouver. And good on the media for holding him to account. $8,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but once you start rolling out all the ancillary items, you're talking about probably $250,000, if not far more, in actually rebranding Vancouver. So again, sometimes governments, right, like they get so wrapped up in their own world that they forget that there are actual real problems. And I'm not sure what the problem is that Gregor Robertson was trying to solve with the new logo.
And I invite people to go online and take a look at what is the current logo, or maybe are we talking about the new old logo? But the one they wanted to replace it with, block letters. Truly, no imaging at all.
No, and that was one of the weird things they were saying. At one point they were touting it that they needed a new logo and brand because so many people were settling here who don't speak English as a first language. Okay, so they get rid of the only graphic element in the logo, which is that kind of flower / mountain / water little mark at the top. Well, so, these people don't speak English and you wanted to reach out to them by what? Getting rid of the only graphic element in the actual logo. Like, they just blundered through this completely. It was clearly the arrogance of Gregor Robertson wanting this thing done because he found the old one quote unquote lame, and that was the way it was.
Well, yes, and when you talk about auxiliary costs, how many city vehicles are there that would have to have a new logo? How many welcoming signs to the city? Those things aren't cheap.
No, and, they'll phase them in much faster than the private sector. It's funny, I was at Shaw Tower today filming some questions for Voice of BC, and one of the pieces of equipment had an old BCTV NewsHour logo. You know, the four or five colors, the circle, and with the little pinwheel. And it was like, I was shocked to see it. It's been so long since I'd seen that logo. And, you know, the NewsHour now is rebranded and, you know, it's become global and all of that. And, you know, in the private sector, you sometimes get an old logo that slips through like that, but you can bet that government with, you know, endless resources, would quickly, switch over to the new logo and the old one would be excised completely. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where you wonder what they were thinking, why they were bothering, and, you know, you just shake your head and say, look, focus on the important things in government. You know, you've got a fentanyl crisis, you've got, high housing costs, you know, you're whining and complaining to senior levels of government constantly, but, you know, about needing more money and them needing to manage things better, and yet you're, you know, blundering around with $8,000 logos. It just doesn't make sense.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond-producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109-carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, BC branch. Jordan, the Trump brothers came here to Vancouver to open up the new Trump Hotel. Policing costs for the city and the RCMP out of this world. Should the Trumps have to reimburse the city for the overtime paid to the cops?
Well, I guess the argument could also be made, should the protesters be forced to pay to reimburse for the cops? I mean, it's chicken or the egg. What came first, the Trump brothers or the protest? Like, you know, people invest in a city. They're building, they build a shiny new building. You've got to expect that there's going to be an opening. They're paying taxes here or the building will pay taxes here for the next, 50 or 60 years as that property is here. So, I'm not so picky on that kind of stuff. You know, it's not like they invited the protest or wanted, costs to grow. I think it's kind of, it would be unfair to ding them and not other people. You know, think of the 420 celebrations that take over the parks. You know, we don't make the organizers pay for the policing costs of those. You know, it's hard for me to rationalize why you ding them.
Yes, in fact, the pot rally, they asked for a permit to gather at Sunset Beach, and the park board turned them down, and they said it's just marijuana prejudice because if they had asked for a liquor license, they would have got one.
Yeah, well, good point. I mean, we allow beer gardens in parks all the time. In fact, competing with those businesses that actually go out and do the licensing and all the important things. So, yeah, it's a fair point. You know, I've talked with Jody Emery about this issue in the past and her frustration with, you know, the promises that were made by Justin Trudeau to change marijuana laws, the lack of speed that his government is tackling those issues with. And then the fact that, you know, they're still throwing people in jail. You know, the Prime Minister comes to Victoria and Vancouver and says that all these marijuana dispensaries should be closed, and people, you know, should be punished according to the law, and yet it's a law that he says is unjust and wants to change. So I don't know how Trudeau gets away with that kind of double talk. I mean, it should be something that his voters punish him for.
Well, 10,000 Canadians a year, I believe, end up with criminal records because of marijuana for simple possession. Years ago, in the city of Seattle, they had a referendum that told the police there to make the enforcement of marijuana laws their very last priority. In other words, go out and ticket dogs without a license or without a leash before you go and bust somebody for a joint.
Yeah, and I, you know, bluntly, can I use that word in a marijuana conversation?
You can say whatever you like.
Honestly, I think the Vancouver Police Department have turned a blind eye to most of the activities. I mean, you see in other cities these dispensaries open and, that same day they're being closed down by bylaws and police. That just doesn't happen in Vancouver. So, I guess chances are the police department has been told to focus on other priorities.
Yeah, because there seems to be a lot more. And I actually found when I moved to Vancouver, the police in Vancouver had the attitude, I don't know if it's the same today, where they were more peace officers than law enforcement officers. As long as everybody was getting along and nobody was getting hurt, they were willing to stand by and supervise. RCMP, on the other hand, are law enforcement officers first.
Yeah, I think that comes with the culture of the department, right, and the locale they're in. The RCMP being a national force, training everyone from coast to coast the same way. The fact that you have many non-British Columbians working in BC RCMP headquarters as, chiefs and, superintendents and officers. Maybe if it was more kind of localized like Vancouver is, which generally draws its members from the Vancouver area, maybe they would have that difference in philosophy. It's a good point. I mean, so it's a point that, I never really put my finger on, but it certainly does describe the differences between local police forces and the RCMP.
Also, too, from a taxpayers' federation, anytime somebody's busted, that costs money.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, think of all the small drug issues that get wrapped up in court. There's a push in Victoria to hire more court bailiffs and sheriffs in order to process more cases. You wonder if you didn't have all the drug cases in there, all the marijuana cases, if that would be enough to open a bit of capacity. So, yeah, I mean, look, I've talked with the Emerys about this. I'm a little bit agnostic on the whole thing. I've never, marijuana legalization is not a burning issue for me by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, I certainly can see the fiscal case they make.
Plus, places like Washington State and Oregon are making 2 to 3 times as much tax money as they expected to. And in some cases, they're wondering where to put all this surplus money.
Well, it's not quite the cash cow that they originally thought. Certainly the police savings have not been nearly as high as they thought it was going to be. So some revenue is a little bit higher. Some expenditures are also haven't dropped as much as they thought. That said, when Trudeau finally does get around to legalizing marijuana, it's very important that if he wants it to be a success, that he not tax it like liquor or cigarettes, because there is an entrenched black market obviously in marijuana production. And the whole point of this exercise is to get rid of the organized crime and the gangs, get them out of the business. And if you're taxing the legal product too much, people will just continue to buy the contraband.
Well, they've run into that problem in Portland, where they now want to make private sales illegal because it's cutting into the profits for the state.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's about getting the bad guys out of drugs, out of the drug trade. If it's about pushing them out, listen, it's one of the dirty little secrets in BC. We have a very robust cigarette contraband trade. There was a study done at UBC looking at cigarette butts that were left behind by students. Something like 1 in 3 were contraband, smuggled in from somewhere else or created by organized crime. So, if you want to get rid of these trades, these gangs, the best way to do it is to choke their money out, and that means you've got to price it at a rate that makes sense to people. It means you can't tax it at 100% or 200% like you do with tobacco. And
I've seen some of the counterfeit brands. They look legit. They've got the tax green plastic stripe and everything.
Yeah. I mean, and in BC we get a certain kind of contraband in Ontario and Quebec. A lot of it's done on the First Nations reserves. These are huge money generators, and the money's not going to, mom and pop or, really nice people. It's going to very bad people who use the money for nefarious purposes. So, I've done a lot. I've talked at marijuana industry conferences, trying to push them to not settle for allowing government to have liquor or tobacco-like control over their product. If you sell this through liquor stores, then government's going to want to be in the marijuana distribution business. That's going to cut into the ability of the private sector to make profit. There's a lot of issues when it comes to marijuana legalization, and frankly, it's probably the most interesting public policy experiment that Canada is going to undertake this decade and maybe in the last several decades.
Well, in BC, you don't see much resistance to it, but I'm sure in very conservative areas, Alberta, for example, they still think marijuana is the footprint of the devil.
Yeah, you still see those odd newspaper columnists too, right, who talk about the gateway drug and the slippery slope and all of that. And that's, part of what the industry has to do, right, is educate people as to what's really going on, and then invest some of their money in the proper health studies to make sure that, the claims that they've been making about marijuana all these years are true.
Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, my pleasure.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, the BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. His website, taxpayer.com. You're listening to The Goddard Report. I am Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.